Well, good day, my friends. We're back in California. How about we do some TV vlogging today? What do you say? Daze with Jordan the Lion begins now. Here we are over on the campus of Pomona College for one of our 80s favorites, Facts of Life. So in the 1970s, the broadcasting network NBC was pretty much third place. They were perennially a last place contender, and they finally had a hit in 1978 with Different Strokes, a Norman Lear production. They were finally doing well, and so they decided to bring Norman Lear in for a new idea. And his idea was to take the housekeeper from Different Strokes, do a spin-off, and that would be Facts of Life. They would bring Mrs. Garrett in to be the house mom for this Eastland Academy. The series, when it started, its first year, it was a totally different show than it would become and be successful at. The first year, there were like 8 girls in the cast. The very first girl that they hired was the girl who was basically the second place to Dana Plato in Different Strokes. So they immediately put her on the show. They found 2 of the Mickey Mouse Club girls, one being Lisa Wetchell, and then they found several other actresses. They found Kim Fields in a commercial, and then they found the girl that played Natalie Green, Mindy Cohn. She was actually attending a real school that the writers and the director and Charlotte Rae, who played Mrs. Garrett, they all went to do kind of a study with real girls to see, you know, when they were doing the show, how they can make it accurate. And they saw Mindy Cohn there, and they just thought she was so different and so funny, and her timing was so great that with no acting training at all, she was also on the show. So it started out with like a head of the school, a man, and then Mrs. Garrett was kind of the school mom, and this was the Eastland Academy, the boarding school that they would all go to. Now, the first year it came out, immediately it got bad reviews. The papers said that it was horrible and that it actually probably would kill the network, so they didn't expect it to last. But they ended up keeping it around because the network was so bad, they really didn't care about the ratings at that point. So after the first year of the show, even though they had bad ratings and everything, they wanted to try and improve it. So they basically cut half the cast, because what they realized was that all the reviews were saying that there was basically a lot of jokes and no story. And they had 8 girls and they had basically 10 people in the cast. So that means everybody had to have lines. So everything was getting kind of spread thin. So they just cut half the girls, fired half the girls. One of the original girls was actually a young Molly Ringwald. They had seen her in a stage production of Little Orphan Annie as one of the background actors and liked her, and so she was on the first season, but then she got offered to be in a movie, and so she left on her own. The rest were fired, so they ended up just keeping Lisa Wetchell, who was Blair. They kept Tootie, who was Kim Fields, and then they kept Mindy Cohn, who was Natalie. They also kept Mrs. Garrett, but they also brought in Jerry Jewell, which was a unique idea because she was an LA comedian who had cerebral palsy, and they had never had a main actor on television at that point that had an affliction like that. And so I remember the joke on the show was when she came on, she was like one of Blair's relatives, and she said, "I'm not drunk, I just have cerebral palsy." And one day she was wearing a shirt. I remember on one of the episodes she said, "You ought to see me when I'm drunk, I walk straight." Like jokes that you would never ever be able to do now, or they would never get away with now. But I remember one night I was at the Comedy Store and she was in the audience, and Brody Stevens was up on the crowd, and he was doing crowd work, and he started talking to her, and she said something to him, and he goes, "What are you? Who are you? Jerry Jewell or something?" And she goes, "Yeah, actually I am." He goes, "What? Are you really?" And she goes, "Yeah, I really am Jerry Jewell." So that was kind of funny. I actually met her and saw her and didn't even know it. But she, you know, she came onto the show the second season. she was a hit on the show. And the third season, her and Lisa Wetchell, who played Blair, actually in real life were roommates, and they lived together for a full year. So kind of shows you that the girls on the show became good friends. And in real life, Charlotte Rae would play that character where she would kind of be the nurturing one of the cast, the one that they could kind of all go to. And so a show that was originally slated to just be a bomb was now, after its second season and now into its third season, it was actually getting better because they hired new writers. They hired 2 other writers from One Day at a Time, and the first thing they did was they said, we want to quit having Tootie on roller skates because, you know, it's very stereotypical of black people. We don't want to do that. And they basically said, you know, you got to quit having them dressed like they're, you know, in California when they're in the peak skills. So those were the 2 big changes. And then they started actually writing in storylines that were meaningful, things that girls their age would deal with, like, you know, divorces or family members dying or, you know, drug problems. They just tried to cover real issues and real topics that would relate to people. So over the years, it became a very popular show. And even when they got old enough to where the girls were graduating, you know, they still found a way to move it from being inside the school into being in Mrs. Garrett's new business. Now, one of the best changes they made in that transition from the first to second season was they found Nancy McKeon, who had done a commercial that one of the producers saw and called the director and said, look at this girl. And they were like, she's amazing. So they immediately hired her, and she became Jo. And on the show, that was one of the characters that everybody kind of could relate to. It was kind of like the rebellious one and the one that was trying to, you know, sneak off in Mrs. Garrett's minivan and get them fake IDs and things like that. So the show had like a little bit of a different character for everyone. Now, they also introduced us to like George Clooney, and he was on the show for a season, the 6th season. They ended up basically offering Jerry Jewell, I think in the 5th season, just 1 episode, and she was kind of insulted, and so she left the show. They brought in Mackenzie Astin, who was Sean Astin's brother and Patty Duke and John Astin's son, and he was great on the show playing Andy. So they found ways of just always kind of changing the show just enough to where it stayed relevant. Like I said, then when the girls started to graduate, the show transitioned from them living here to them living, when Mrs. Garrett opens a store, they end up living basically in her attic at the store. Where are you going? So the show was doing well. The girls weren't really happy with their pay because when they came on, the NBC was doing so bad that they took basically bottom dollar. So they negotiated, got more money, and then eventually Charlotte Rae just kind of decided at the end of the 7th season that she didn't want to come back. She said, the girls are getting older now. They won't really have a need for a character like me, and I want to do other things. So she basically left, and they wrote Cloris Leachman to come in as her sister and take over and kind of fill that role, and Charlotte Rae went off and went back to doing stage the way she loved to before. The show ended up lasting for 9 seasons. They basically just started running out of ideas, and NBC started having really good luck with having the Cosby Show. They were the top of the ratings, and they didn't want to have a show that had dropped all the way down to like the 50th or 60th slot. So the end of 9 seasons, they called an end to it. Nancy McKeon had already went off. She had started co-producing made-for-TV movies. Mindy Cohn ended up going off and doing Suddenly Susan with Brooke Shields. Lisa Wetchell was very religious her whole life, and that was actually one of the catalysts for her kind of being done with the show. Is they eventually were trying to save the show by having one of the girls have premarital sex, and they wanted Blair to be the one. And Lisa Wetchell just said, I realized throughout the time in the show that we make a difference to people's lives that watch us, and I didn't want to send that message. So Mindy Cohn said, I'll do it. And so her character, Natalie Green, ends up having premarital sex in one of the episodes, but they still ended up ending the show. And what's crazy is what happened pretty recently, within the last like 2 years. So Norman Lear has done these live TV broadcasts where he brings his old television shows like Good Times and The Jeffersons and things like that back for one night only for like a live on TV performance. And they decided to do this with The Facts of Life. And I don't think Nancy McKeon was part of it, maybe she was, but I know for sure it was like Kim Fields, Mindy Cohn, and Lisa Wetchell. And Lisa Wetchell actually started the whole show by coming out and singing the whole theme song. Well, There was an interview that I found where they were talking to Mindy Cohn, and they were stating that there was basically this rumor now that a lot of the cast members are now mad at Lisa because they said after they did that, they were getting approached with offers to do like a reboot or to do some sort of show, kind of like how they did with Fuller House. And as they were negotiating this, they found out behind their back that they had heard that they weren't saying by name, but they were saying that one of the members was trying to make deals solo and exclude them behind the scenes, and they were so offended by it. I mean, Mindy basically says, Kim and I are so offended by it that we don't ever want to work with that person again. So I don't know that I mean, they kind of lead you to believe that it's Lisa who did that. I think that's kind of sad that, you know, they would have that kind of beef over something like money. I can totally understand it. That's what happens. But you would think for just like putting a nice little bow on this show that they would have, you know, wanted to find a way to do one more thing. There it is. That was the Eastland Academy boarding school for girls from 1979 to 1988. Pretty cool. Pretty cool to see that. I love seeing filming locations, and as you can see, people are coming and going because it's still used today. It's like a dormitory now. Sadly, Norman Lear recently passed away. He was 100 years old, so he had a nice long life, left a lot of great television shows, and Facts of Life was just one of them. Thank you everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. We will see you next time from somewhere else. Have a great night, and goodbye.